Hi there, hello, salut, bonjour. I hope you're doing very well from wherever you're watching at this moment on this beautiful day that the Lord has made. As always, thank you again for sharing with your circles, for subscribing to the channel, and for also liking for those who like and for commenting. Your comments are so insightful, and thank you for all that you do to keep the movement going and to continue to shine a spotlight on the Republic of Cameroon. And today is Sunday, November 16, 2025. It's a unique day. We take a pause from all the noise, we slow things down, and we turn our attention to a pillar of Cameroon's soul, which is the church. And because whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, traditionalist, or none of the above, one truth remains. No institution in Cameroon has shaped the moral imagination of the people more than the church. And yet, in the heat of this election crisis, in the historic election crisis that Cameroon is experiencing this 2025, many Cameroonians find themselves asking, where is the church now? What has it done? What has it not done? And what should the church be doing at this critical hour? Today, we attempt answers to these questions with facts, history, critique, and most especially conscience. And I know, as usual, we always start with fresh updates of the top and a little bit of analysis on the side. It would be difficult to pursue that because today we want to focus only on this particular topic, which is the role of the church and the expectations of the people, especially at this particular turning point when Cameroon is at the crossroads. And today is a Sunday, and it's a befitting day. You know, when it comes to matters of God, we dedicate a specific day and we address only that. Maybe that's my only excuse. But I do know that there's so much that has happened in the last 24, 48 hours that I can update you on. But again, I will do that in a subsequent piece. So for this one, just bear with me. And let's go right into it. What has the church done? Fact and history. Let's begin with what is undeniable. The Catholic Church in particular has long been a central actor in Cameroon's political and civic life. The bishops who spoke when others fell silent. From days of Monseigneur Ndogmo.
Je suis ici suite à une situation politique dramatique dans mon pays.
Le Cameroun.
Le Cameroun. J'ai été appréhendé par les pouvoirs politiques, jugé par un tribunal militaire, condamné à mort, puis gracié, puis condamné à la détention perpétuelle.
To Christian Cardinal Tommy.
Au Cameroun, on ne pouvait rien dire sur la vie politique du pays sans que ça arrive à la présidence.
Mais est-ce qu'à l'époque, quand vous discutiez avec lui, vous sentez que c'était un monsieur qui avait vraiment qui avait pour but de pousser le peuple camerounais vers la démocratie? Quelle est l'image que vous aviez de lui?
Non, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, quand on parle avec le président, Paul Biya, on voit chez lui quelqu'un qui veut le bien du pays. Mais je me demande, est-ce que le problème c'est son entourage?
Before his demise, he did enormous work to awaken consciences and to continue to champion causes that align with democratic values and principles. The church consistently warned against corruption, authoritarianism, and the erosion of freedoms. Toomey spoke during single-party rule, multi-party transition, and the Anglophone crisis, and even paid a price for his boldness. He was kidnapped in the Northwest, as you remember, during the crisis, interrogated, humiliated, shaken physically and emotionally. His courage still echoes today. We also note that observing elections, the church in Cameroon, especially the Catholic Church, did not sit on the sidelines. This year alone, the National Episcopal Conference published a communiqué confirming that the church observed more than 12,000 polling stations, a massive civic feat. They saw irregularities, they documented malpractices, they also raised alarms. The church did what the law allows. It observed, it documented, and it spoke. talk about the bishops that came out boldly. Bishop Samuel Kleda. As you know, just a week or two ago, Archbishop Samuel Kleda of Douala issued a profound message. He said, the 2025 election was meant to be the Kairos moment for Cameroon, a divine moment of truth, accountability and renewal.
L'élection présidentielle du 12 octobre 2025 s'est présentée pour nous, Camerounaises et Camerounais, comme le Kairos.
He lamented the violence, called for the release of those arrested, and reminded the government that a nation cannot be built on fear. And from Douala in the littoral region of Cameroon to Bafang in the west region of Cameroon, the Bishop of Bafang wrote a blistering letter to the governor of the west region, rejecting the claim that his silence or the church's silence is a good thing. And in that open letter, Bishop Kome reminded the governor of the west region, and by extension, his hierarchy, that his silence was never to be misconstrued for agreement, and that as a pastoral leader, he has a different view on society and the well-being of the people compared to the governor's orders that he has to follow that always comes from the hierarchy, and that he will continue to fight for the well-being of the people under his care and stewardship. And we can say that letter would go down among one of the most courageous clerical statements in recent years in Cameroon. Now, let's talk about the letter from Father Ludovic Lado, a modern prophet. Father Ludovic Lado went further. He wrote to the Pope himself, urging that the papal visit to Cameroon be postponed because the regime would use it to legitimize illegitimate power. Fewer priests dare speak at that level. Although some would say Father Ludovic Lado is out of the country at the moment, but his positions haven't shifted over the years. And that aside, let's talk about the nuncio in Bamenda. You've seen the video go viral just within the last 48 hours. That moment that went viral.
Representative of the President of the Republic of Cameroon, His Excellency Paul Biya.
During his visit to Bamenda, the Apostolic Nuncio addressed the faithful, and when he mentioned the name of Paul Biya as the President of the Republic of Cameroon, the hall went silent. Then murmurs, then visible discomfort. You can see that reaction for yourself. That from devout Christians, it was hard to hide the displeasure, revealing the kind of truth that the government cannot censor. Because even within the church walls, the legitimacy crisis is real. However, that said, let's move on to the next level in part 2, where we talk about what the church has not done. And here is our critic, here is our moment. Because I know that from the beginning, some of you may have been thinking that, okay, this is some kind of like, throwing the grains at the church in this case. No. On Voices Without Borders, we make sure that we approach every topic of conversation from a place of balance. We try to go as far as possible to make sure that we bring you the facts and also tell you why it matters. We may report the facts, we may comment on the facts, we may analyze the facts, but we go beyond and provide context, and if possible, offer solutions where there are some items that could lead to some positive outcome. And this topic is not an exception, because we continue to be honest and tell ourselves the truth. For every Cameroonian praising the church, there is another asking, but why didn't the church go further? Why didn't the church speak louder? Why didn't the church take a firmer stand as people were being killed? This critic comes from a place of pain, not hatred. The church has a moral authority, but rarely uses institutional authority. The church has schools, hospitals, media networks, social capital, national coverage. Yet, its official statements often feel careful, coded, and diplomatic. But Cameroonians are not living in diplomatic times. Some clergy appear too close to the regime. We've all seen the images. Front row carpets for ministers, special seats, clerics hosting politicians during mass, and the silence that follows. It blurs the lines. It creates suspicion. It weakens moral authority. The church is fragmented in its response. While bishops in Douala, Bafang, and some Anglophone dioceses speak boldly, or even the bishop in Yagua, other dioceses remain silent. This inconsistency hurts public confidence. The people expect the church to be the national mediator, and that is what they expected the church to do. During the Côte d'Ivoire crisis, as we all know it in 2010, the Catholic Church played a frontline role in mediation. Archbishops in Abidjan confronted Laurent Gbagbo. Priests sheltered civilians. The church took risks. And in Kenya, during the 2007 to 2008 crisis, clerics served as mediators between Kibaki and Raila Odinga. Cameroonians expected the same, a united national moral force. But instead, they got pockets of courage, not a collective institutional stand. So, putting all of this together, let's try to connect the dots and put all the pieces of the puzzle together so we can see the big picture. Because this is where we try to probe as to why it matters now in 2025 in this particular ongoing crisis. Because Cameroon has arrived at the crossroads. In fact, it has gone beyond the crossroads. It has passed the tipping point, and nobody knows what will happen tomorrow. Yes, Yaoundé may seem chill and calm. People may call off the bluff and say Issa Tchiroma 48 hours was nonsense. We could hear all kinds of speculations and all kinds of name calling. Distractions here and there. The people are talking about football, Fekafoot, Samuel Etofis, Minister Mwele Kombi, all these things. We cannot be sidetracked because we do know that there are families mourning as we speak. There are those youth languishing in different cells, held against their will. Some are going through enormous torture. We hear reports of people killed and made to disappear. Families don't yet have the corpses. People are looking for loved ones. They don't even know where they are. People have been arrested in their localities and transported into Yaoundé and facing a military court. Things that are unthinkable. The Minister of Territorial Administration is going around the country, crisscrossing and making threats.
Irresponsible behavior coming from a candidate who pretends to have won the election. He cannot win. And he will pay for the crimes no matter where he is hiding.
Telling people that Issa Tchiroma is going to pay for all that he has caused. But one thing is for sure, and I think that's what many of these people that are just taking Cameroonians for granted are missing, is the fact that Cameroon today has two presidents, whether we like it or not. Two presidents, one declared by a constitutional council exposed in a champagne toasting scandal, and one claiming legitimacy from votes and the streets. 3 days of ghost towns. Yes, it defied fear. People were arrested, their shops were locked. We don't even know if they've been able to reopen. And that is so difficult. Yes, there are calls for other ghost towns. And we do know that the Anglophone regions are already experiencing ghost towns every Monday. Despite life in those areas not returning to normal, we also know that the security situation is not yet sorted out and people are still living in limbo. Now, when you look at the other parts of the country, people are being arrested for reasons they have no idea. Others are tortured. People are taken to Yaoundé. And others are living in fear. TV stations are called to question. And there are people that will have to appear before the SDO on Monday the 17th. And where do we think we're headed? And in the midst of all this, even the victory of the indomitable lions that used to serve as a national painkiller has lost its potency because Cameroon fell short in front of DR Congo, a country that Cameroon is normally supposed to beat easy peasy. But observers will tell you that that is nothing. It didn't start there. Because how did Cape Verde even qualify in a group that Cameroon was supposed to dominate and top up? Because, as you can hear from the sidelines, the issues between FECAFOOT and the Ministry of Sports and Physical Education, or sports as they call it now. Seasoned sports commentators will be quick to tell you that everything was done for Cameroon to fail because the national team is at the image of the country itself. One would have expected that the players even wear a black band, show some solidarity for the young people that were shot and killed, for all the families that are mourning, for the tension that's rising in the country. But that is a topic for another day. None of that happened because, of course, there's a sense that anybody that shows their disdain publicly may just risk never be called again for the national team. And we are saying that at this point, a nation is in mourning. The clergy is awakening, no doubt, but not fully mobilized. The young people shot dead, including Mami Ero. We forgot about that. Mami Ero. This woman ran away from the crisis in the Anglophone regions, only to end up in Douala, shot and killed by a stray bullet. That was heartbreaking. Among the many others that have lost their lives senselessly. One has to stop and ask, why is that in this country, every time there's a presidential election, people have to die? There has to be some form of bloodshed. Why is it so? And yet, there are people that are trying to defend tooth and nail that this government is legitimate at all costs. What about information blackout? Social media throttling? People have to now use VPNs in their own country to access the internet, something that is offered free through satellite. Yet, just because the country, the regime, the governing elite, the small clique of those that are in high places, they don't want Cameroonians, everyday Cameroonians, to see what is going on so that they can awaken their consciences and be more alert to understand that after 43 years of service, one would expect that a president should be satisfied with all they have done for their country, that they've given their all and there's no more left, and therefore retire and prepare a transition and prepare a succession and allow the country to emerge just like the Vision 2035, or to progress depending on the different pillars of development that one must have put in place. But to be holding on to the reins of power, or to be controlled by an entourage that was handpicked, because all of the people that surround President Paul Biya, none of them came there by magic. He carefully curated his entourage. And like I've mentioned before, a good leader is known by the kinds of people that he or she surrounds themselves with. And as you can see, there's a lot we can talk about, but I don't want to keep digressing, so thank you for bearing with me. Now let's come back to our central theme as we move on to talk about what can the church do now. And that is where I was also finishing my point to say there is a moral void because leadership is absent where it matters. And this is precisely the moment when Cameroonians expect the church to speak with one voice, loud, clear, and firm, not partisan, not political, but prophetic. And so, where do we go from here? As we are talking about what can the church do now, a path forward. At least for starters, reclaim the prophetic voice. When the church speaks firmly, regimes tremble. When it whispers, regimes grow bold. And also, demand transparency and justice. The church observed 12,000 plus polling stations. They monitored. It has enough data to speak truthfully. History will remember whether it did. because those 12,000 plus pavers, it's already about 30% or more. And if we start contrasting them with Issa Tchiroma Bakari's version of the story and the pavers that he was able to deploy on the web, using those of Diso with Maître Michel Doki, and also the evidence that we saw across the web, and then asking the CPDM candidate, since we heard Minister Garoua say on his socials that they are the only political party that has all the 31,653 pavers, let them bring theirs. And the church has the moral grounds to walk that path. And now, let's talk about mediation. Real mediation. Not ceremony, not protocol, but truth-based mediation between the people, the regime, and the emerging movement behind Issa Tchiroma Bakari. Because we should never forget one thing. Because even with the official results that was proclaimed by the Constitutional Council, Issa Tchiroma Bakari earned 35% of the electorate. In a functioning democracy, that is an official status as opposition leader, opposition party, with a lot of support and finances to actually hold the government to account. But yet, again, he's been chased away, called all sorts of names, while those who went on the street to protest and call for a recount and a respect of their vote are being called assailants, drug addicts, criminals, and what have you. That is a Cameroon that we do not want to see. And therefore the church has a big role to play, to stand with the victims publicly, for those killed in the protests, for those arrested, for those tortured, for the families who stay awake all night waiting for loved ones to return. They are unsure if their children will return home. For those who don't even have the courage to send their kids outside because they are afraid, they don't know what can happen to them. The church must stand visibly, tangibly, and loudly with them. And as if that is not enough, the church must protect the nation from religious manipulation. Because as hate speech rises, Muslims mocked, as we've seen the case that just happened recently with a mosque being attacked. Of course, the regime is pointing accusing fingers to the defense forces of the Ambazonia movement. And the leaders of the Ambazonia movement are saying they have nothing to do with it. In between lies the truth. People are dead, many are injured. And we all know that there's a heavy stigmatization of those from the north. They are profiled. Anglophones are abused. We see that beyond marginalization. So the church, mosques, synagogues, and all faith houses must stand as one moral shield to protect Cameroon and Cameroonians. So, we have to be reflective, strong, but hopeful. And so this Sunday, I take this special opportunity to say, we stand in a country with two presidents, two visions, and two futures, but only one moral compass, the conscience of the people and the institutions, including the church, that dare to defend it. Cameroon is changing. The youth are awake. The civil society is louder. The diaspora is coordinated. And even within church pews, people no longer clap for power. They clap for truth. Therefore, if the church chooses courage, Cameroon may go on to find lasting peace. If it chooses silence, it risks standing on the wrong side of history. This is the moment. This is a test. And this is Cameroon's Kairos. Again, thank you for staying vigilant. Thank you for watching. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. And thank you for commenting. We need to continue to shine the spotlight on the regime in Yaoundé, on the country as a whole, on the plight of the people, because we can go down that rabbit hole. There's lots of so many things that we can tackle. The bad roads, the inadequate infrastructure for school. We just have a school in Ngaoundéré that collapsed, or not collapsed, part of the wall that collapsed in a school somewhere in a source, and a child lost their life. And we know there will be no good inquiry and nobody is going to answer to that. And yet, when you look at the infrastructure, you can tell that does that building meet the standard for building? Isn't it time that there is a strong union of those that are in building and construction in the country that can make sure that they can vet all public edifices to see if they meet the standards? What is happening to the different professional corps? Do we want to talk about road construction? Can we talk about the medical sector? Can we even go to the education? There's a lot. But again, we are focusing on making sure that even the governance of the country changes itself and molds to become good governance. When we have that in place, of course, it takes good institutions, strong institutions, to hold the government accountable. And the people say they voted for change, and that change hasn't come to them. And that explains why we're focusing our attention today on the church. We all know the role that the church can play. We're just asking ourselves some pertinent questions. That despite some of the highlights that I pointed at the beginning, and probe into the critique of what has been lacking, here is what we expect. And we know that so many of you have things on your mind. Please leave them in the comments. And of course, this has nothing to do with trying to single out the inadequacies of the church. This is more about the same public civic discourse that we're having, and how we look at the different actors, the stakeholders, the people that contribute to form the nation called Cameroon. Because we do know, like we've mentioned, the church has tentacles all over Cameroon. It's not just the Catholic Church. The Presbyterian Church has schools. The Baptists, they have schools. They have institutions. They teach. They have hospitals. And it doesn't end there. You can even talk about the Muslim community, the imams, all over the north. You know, they are the first spaces where people learn how to read and write. They have a big role to play in education. We know we've talked about the elite. Here we are trying to talk about the church. And we've mentioned some key players and some key moments and the acts of courage that they've displayed. We may not have had an exhaustive list, but we do understand, like we've mentioned, Cameroonians are not living in diplomatic times. There is a lot that needs to be done. As always, stay safe, stay awake, stay hopeful, stay vigilant. Cameroonians home and abroad. May God bless you, and may God bless Cameroon.